Shak. I'm a bipolar empath, and on today's episode, I'll be interviewing Yollanda Zhang, who's a fellow friend of mine and colleague who has been doing great work in the space of bipolar disorder herself. Today, we'll be speaking about various topics surrounding key issues that impact our community. Well, thank you for being here today, Yollanda. I really appreciate you agreeing to this interview. I always believe there's a reason and a purpose for things happening in someone's life. And what's amazing about today is Norma and I came up with this idea, in November, December of last year. And we're like, how cool would it be to have a shoot where I can interview someone that has their own lived experience with bipolar and really just have a candid conversation about what that looks like for them, what that is, and how they experience it. And lo and behold, in January, when I started my practicum for my counseling psychology program, you happened to be the keynote speaker at the opening of my clinic. And when I heard your story, which, in a few seconds, I'll allow you to kind of introduce yourself as well, it was really like, wow, this is the person I need to be talking to. So without ado, I could introduce you myself, but I thought I would not do it justice to kind of what you would do. So if you could just maybe spend a few minutes just introducing yourself to the audience.
Sure. Well, first, I want to say how serendipitous it is that we met that way, because I almost didn't go that day. As you know, the event changed dates. And so I almost didn't go. And because it's not really, the focus wasn't really about bipolar disorder, or it wasn't about me, I wasn't even going to share that I have lived experience with bipolar disorder. I don't even know why. It wasn't in my original script, but when I was speaking, it just kind of flowed out, and it seemed to really flow with whatever the rest of my keynote was. And that's what you heard. So it's so interesting that these pieces wouldn't have happened. So I guess to introduce myself, I kind of had a pretty multifaceted career, from being an engineer to being a teacher to being an entrepreneur. And now maybe my next step is definitely, using the Master's of Counseling Psychology program, which we're both, you finished, all finishing. And maybe an author. So there's so many different parts of my life, but I think the one constant for me has been living with bipolar disorder. So this year would be my 25th year of living with the condition. And, it's a condition that has really brought me a lot of challenges and derailed my plans in life in some pretty big ways. But I would say it's also the teacher that I am most indebted to becoming who I am.
Wow. I love that. I love the way you phrase that, because that resonates a lot with me. Like, a lot of why I began Bipolar Empath was, as traumatic an experience as kind of going through my first episode was, what I think it really gave me was the gift of empathy, right? And something where before I had gone through that experience, I would say I wasn't overly empathetic towards other people's mental health. I might have been sympathetic to when people were going through things, but I didn't really get it. Right. And I don't know, maybe it was more natural for you, but I don't know if as you went through your own journey, whether it kind of gave you also a gift of being able to see things in a different light and a different perspective for people. Can you maybe comment on that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, so when I was diagnosed, I was in my second year of engineering at University of Waterloo. It's a, fairly competitive program. It's mostly men as well. And I think that feminine intuitive side of me wasn't really given the safe space to thrive. And that's just the nature of the industry. And I'm sure it's changed somewhat now. I wouldn't say changed a lot, because I know it hasn't.
Right.
but it's changed somewhat now. So I do think that living with this condition, it almost like forces me to be more connected to my own feminine energy, to be connected to my own intuition, because that's what needs to guide me in my own healing.
Right.
So, absolutely, I feel like I've become much more empathetic um, since then, because before that, I think my goal in life looks so different than what my goal in life is now.
Mm.
And it shook it up completely.
Right.
I think both of us have this shared experience in the previous chapter of being in corporate and really striving. I mean, you stayed in corporate a lot longer than I have, but
Yeah.
like just that mentality of striving, of, mind over matter, it's a lot of like masculine
Hmm.
energy for you to be able to excel.
Yeah.
And so you're not really given the space to be empathetic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great that you could even be sympathetic, but like
Yeah.
it's hard for you to put yourself in the shoes of people who are struggling and dealing with these things, because back then it was seen as weakness, right?
Hmm.
It's like, oh, how could you not? It's just in your head. You don't have any broken bones. And I remember
Yeah.
I was being told, oh, at least you don't have cancer. That
Yeah.
was a very
Yeah.
common thing that people were saying to me to help me feel better, they thought, right?
Right.
Just like, oh, at least it's not cancer.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely hear what you're saying there. Mental health, even today,
Yeah.
there's a lot of stigma around mental health and what are you really going through? Like people kind of brushing it off as, oh, it's you'll get over it. Like you're down today and you'll get over it. And I think they're really, I think a lot of why we do the work we do is
Mm,
around breaking down those walls and supporting people
yeah.
in really dark moments and moments of crisis, right,
Yeah.
in their life. And even when I say I was sympathetic towards people's issues, I think even that was probably a stretch. Like I completely echo what you're saying is, that corporate culture is really, I love the way you phrased it with that masculine energy, right?
Hmm.
And really kind of that toxicity around the competition of trying to be the best, trying to get ahead. And I think as I've moved forward, what I didn't appreciate about myself was that I could get to a place where putting others first was a lot more rewarding and enriching to me than putting my own goals and objectives first.
Yeah.
And I love what you've done with your own um, business and your own passion for mental health, starting the Courage Circle, for
Hmm.
example, and supporting our peers in their own journeys. Can you maybe touch a bit on the work you do in the Courage Circle and how you've been able to support people through their journeys and stories?
Yeah. Well, it kind of really started 5 years ago,
Hmm.
almost 5 years ago, when I first shared openly about living with bipolar disorder. Because 3 years before that, so 8 years ago,
Right.
I was invited to be part of a video project for Sunnybrook, and it was called Out of Darkness.
Mm.
So they were doing features of people living with bipolar disorder. They were going to choose 6 different individuals, and so I was one of them that they wanted to do this whole story about. But I wasn't comfortable
Right.
yet 8 years ago
Yeah.
to share my story so publicly. And it was because my daughter was, only 5 years old at that time. And I thought sharing my story is sharing her story because of the genetic, um, you know, condition that bipolar disorder is. I thought sharing it so publicly might impact her. So I want her to be able to have a say whether this is a story that she would be okay with her
Right.
mom sharing. So I said no to that project, but it stayed with me. I always felt not regret, but I always felt it was necessary
Hmm.
to see the human side of bipolar disorder, not just what's in the DSM, not the diagnostic criteria, but like what
Yeah.
does it mean to live with this condition?
Right.
And so 3 years after that, which was 5 years ago today, not today, but 5 years ago,
Hmm.
um, I ended up posting a very like vulnerable article about my 20-year secret,
Yeah.
which was the bipolar disorder. And since that happened, people would reach out to me because prior to that, I actually didn't know anyone in my personal network that lived with bipolar disorder.
Right.
So it was a lonely experience. I mean, I did join support groups, here and there, but I never stayed long because I always felt the support groups that I joined, from the hospitals where I stayed or different organizations, it scared me. Like it scared me to be in such a big group of people that lived with fairly severe symptoms,
Yeah.
and I wasn't comfortable. So, but after sharing about it publicly and people would reach out to me individually, I think organically, I just collected a group of people, women especially, that didn't see bipolar disorder as this huge curse
Hmm.
that happened in their lives. I mean, sure, there were terrible times. Like I was hospitalized twice
Hmm.
with very severe symptoms, and all of the people I work with have all been hospitalized before too. But I think we see the benefits of being given this gift. I do see it as a gift of bipolar disorder.
Yeah.
And so I think that's how Courage Circle kind of naturally formed,
Right.
is we were just connected because of my story that I shared openly. And then we have this shared perspective of bipolar disorder not being a curse, but like actually a gift,
Hmm.
that if we look at it in that way and we see what is there for us to learn from,
Right.
we can all grow together. And so Courage Circle this year would be our third year of
Right.
operating. And the
I'd like to
people
applaud
that,
you for that.
oh, thank
Yeah.
you. I mean, it's a very small group of
Yeah.
people because I think our society also teaches that unless you do something huge with like millions of people, then what you're doing is not worth doing or celebrating.
Right.
I mean, we have a really small group of women, but we've stuck together from the beginning,
Yeah.
and our journey kind of just evolved and changed. And we've been through some of the hardest times together. And yeah, so it's taught me a lot, being like, I don't see myself as like leading. We co-created this.
Right.
So the way it's structured, the way that we do our weekly sessions, is all been co-created with people with lived experience. So it's very
Yeah.
much like the peer support type of model now that mental health organizations are really embracing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I love the work you've been doing with it. Like when I hear you talk about it, it's such a needed thing in this world, because I agree with you that oftentimes those of us that live with bipolar feel like we're going through it alone.
Yeah.
Even though we have a lot of people in our support networks. So I don't want to say a lot of people, like some people don't have anyone in
Right.
their support
Yeah.
networks, right? But to have peers that really get it, that really
Yeah.
understand, when you're in a manic state or a depressive state, or having an episode, being hospitalized, like what that actually means
Yeah.
is so important, to have that validation and that support from a peer network. And it's amazing how many similarities there are in how our stories overlap, because it was about 4.5 years ago that I also publicly posted an article
Mhm.
on LinkedIn. And prior to that, those close to me had known about my condition because it happened in such a public way. It happened at a work event, at a
Yeah.
work conference, that I just assumed people knew, even though a lot of people didn't know
Mm.
what had happened. So it was almost cathartic for me to speak to my network, and tell them what had happened, just to heal for
Yeah.
myself and get support and words of encouragement from people around me. But when I posted it publicly was when I had already left the corporate world. And it was scary. Like when I was going to click the button to go live, I was like, wow, this is beyond my network. This could go anywhere.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know. And as soon as I did that, like I had immense anxiety around, wow, this is actually happening.
Right.
But similar to you, I started to get a lot of support, a lot of words of encouragement, people reaching out that were telling me things that, they even said in confidence that their spouse didn't even know about them.
Yeah.
And I was blown away with, wow, like people are looking for those communities and looking for that support. And through that experience is kind of when I really started to get the wheels turning in my head about bipolar. At that time, it wasn't bipolar empath. It was just I knew I wanted to do something,
Mm-hmm.
and it was an amazing experience for that. But in your experience, because you were diagnosed in 2000, I believe you said, and
Yeah.
you came out publicly in 2020.
Yeah.
That must have been, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
Mm.
that must have been a very difficult thing to carry with you. Obviously, those closest to you would have known, but
Yeah.
to carry with you kind of personally, how were you able to manage your emotions during that period of time?
Do you mean like the 20 years
Yeah,
or
like the
like
20, like the 20 years.
okay.
Yeah.
There was definitely a lot of shame for sure because, shame cannot live in the light.
Yeah.
So I was always like trying to keep this in. And at first it was like my parents trying to protect me. They were the first to know, of course,
Yeah.
because I couldn't get up for classes. I wasn't like cooking for myself anymore. And so they had to really be the first supporters for me. So they would come visit Waterloo, they would bring food, they would like, I don't even know how, like, I got through that year because engineering is not easy.
Yeah.
And
Waterloo engineering, especially. Yeah.
yeah, it was not easy. But I had great people, like my roommates, classmates. They didn't know what was going on. I kept telling them that I have a headache. So everybody just thought that Yollanda has like migraines.
Hmm.
She can't come to class. So then they would bring notes for me so I can catch up, even though I couldn't go to class.
Right.
And because my parents said, like, very seriously, you cannot tell anyone. Your life will be completely like over and changed if you told anybody. So I didn't even tell my roommates. I
Yeah.
just kept telling them that like I was having headaches and it was like really bad. And they would say, "Well, you should go to the doctor, you should go get like medication." I was like, "Yeah, I know." But inside I knew that that wasn't true.
Yeah.
And and my and I even thought, do I need to tell my university? Is there support here? But my parents were like, no, you can't tell your university. They're gonna like kick you out of the program. It was really hard to like get into the program in the first place.
Yeah.
And so I didn't tell anyone. I mean, now I know, in the master's program, very first thing, I was like, what are your accommodations for people living with disability? Like, I know now to speak up for myself, to get the support that I deserve.
Yeah.
But 25 years ago, when I was in university, it was all about shame and like
Hmm.
keeping that in. But people who were close to me, eventually did find out because I knew that it would be important for my future partner to know this.
Yeah.
So I remember I was like 22. I met my now husband, then boyfriend. I think on our second date, I said, listen, I live with a condition called bipolar disorder. You better look it up. And if you're not okay with
Yeah.
it, we need to just break up right now because I can't like continue with somebody who is not supportive.
Yeah.
So I think I was very selective in the way I told the story because I knew that in a romantic relationship, this could be a deal breaker for
Hmm.
some. And I didn't want to continue that shame into a romantic relationship.
Yeah.
So, he was like, oh my God, a girl likes me. No, I'm just kidding. um, he went through a lot of trouble to get me to like him. So when I told him this, he was like, oh, it's fine. I think I could have said I have 3 heads and he would have said that's fine. But um, but I think for him, he didn't really know what it was until I was pregnant with our daughter and I had my first psychotic episode and I
Mhm.
was hospitalized. Did he know what bipolar disorder could be? Because I didn't even know,
Right.
right, what it could be. Um, and there were close friends, of course, that knew as well. But a lot of people I think that should have known didn't know. Like my husband's entire family didn't know until I shared publicly.
Yeah.
Like literally, 5 years ago, they didn't know.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's just the way this whole mental health struggles are for a lot of people. Like you alluded to this earlier about just that loneliness of living with this. And not everybody has support,
Hmm.
right? Even though I would consider myself extremely lucky to have the support that I do. But in the darkest times, you're not programmed to reach out for support. And people don't always know.
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of people, after some of the celebrity, died by suicide, like Robin Williams, Kate
Hmm.
Spade, people are like, how could they die by suicide? Like they have so many people, that love them, that care about them.
Yeah.
Well, having been to that depth of darkness, I understand.
Yeah.
No matter how many people you have, like you just feel so alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that probably sums up the 20 years.
Yeah.
And sharing it publicly, just like you said about you sharing it, that hesitation, that anxiety of like clicking that button.
Yeah.
Yeah, I experienced all of that too.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was also very freeing, right? It's like a huge weight lifted.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of corporate clients where I do workshops and keynotes and talks.
Yeah.
And often it's those private conversations that happen afterwards that really make me realize the importance of doing this kind of work um, everywhere, but especially corporate, because so many people are suffering in silence.
Yeah.
And I think the statistics now is like the impact of mental health on like truancy and loss of hours and disability leaves. It's like astronomical. Like it's increased a lot over
Yeah.
the years.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, and yeah, there is so much gems in what you just said that I would love to touch on. The point that you made on accessibility
Mm.
for academic accommodations is something that, when I was in my undergrad at Laurier, which we just so happened to overlap at our
Yeah.
time in the city of Waterloo, um, I always looked down on people that took academic accommodations.
Hmm.
I'm like, why are these lazy people doing these things that I'm working so hard for? Like, I never got it. Like, I never
Right.
really understood what it was. And, when I was diagnosed with bipolar, I finally was like, wow, like, I get it. Like, I understand why some people need to have things structured a certain way, potentially given more time for things, and have both academic and workplace accommodations to help
Hmm.
support them. And so when I entered the master's in counseling psychology, like you would have think my first thing would have been like, oh yeah, I'll get an accommodation, no problem. I had a lot of shame
Mm.
around reaching out to the accessibility office because I'm
Yeah.
like, is what I have severe enough to even ask for an academic accommodation? And I eventually rationalized in my head that it's not that um, I'm any less capable of doing things
Right.
than other people. It's just that at times, uh, to be at my best, I might need an extra week to do an assignment. I might need, I also have a visual impairment, so I might need
Mm.
aids to be able to, I can't read a textbook, but I can have the text to audio read it back for me, and that can help me get through the program. So I have so much more respect for the need to make both school and workplace settings accessible and accommodating for people.
Yeah.
And part of my work is really to help push that agenda, and really help workplaces understand that just because someone lives with a mental illness, just because someone struggles with something, doesn't make them any less capable or valuable to your organization, and they can provide really good product or services for you, right? And
Yeah.
we need to embrace people that way, you
Absolutely.
know. And the other thing that you mentioned, that I kind of smile about is entering a romantic relationship.
Mm,
Is I also have a lot of fear today,
mm,
because I'm still single, and I have a lot of fear around what does that look like, right? Can someone handle the worst parts of me? Because a lot of people will see the best of me. I always say I'm an easy guy to fall in love with. I'm a hard guy to stay in love with.
mm.
And some of that is just me being hard on myself, but a lot of it is grounded in, can someone handle seeing me in a hospital if I have an episode, or
Yeah.
go through psychosis, because that's a very difficult place to be, right? And what that looks like. And the third part of it that really struck a chord with me was, like, I've also been hospitalized twice for my own condition.
Yeah.
I believe you mentioned that you were hospitalized while you were pregnant. Is that
Yeah.
right?
I was my first trimester.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How how was that experience overall? I mean, that's probably a stupid question, but
Mm.
I can only imagine what that experience must have been like while being pregnant.
There are no stupid questions, but
Yeah.
it was really scary because we weren't sure, like, what is the impact on the baby. And we had lost 2 pregnancies before. So we were already on, like, edge. We were seeing a fertility doctor, and, finally we're pregnant. And so it was like this scary, really scary thing. And it happened so suddenly, with the episode. It was also my very first manic episode. I had hypomania before, in the form of, like, excessive shopping
Hmm.
and not sleeping and flight of ideas. So I had that experience, which gave me the diagnosis 25 years ago.
Yeah.
But when I was pregnant with my daughter, because I had bipolar too. So when I was pregnant with my daughter, I guess the surge of hormones and everything that was, happening, not cost, but, like, was the sort of the catalyst to a full-blown psychotic episode. And I was actually admitted to PICU, psychiatric ICU.
Right.
So that's the locked unit, like the most severe cases.
Mm.
And I was completely unsure of what was happening. And it was so scary for my husband, for my parents, and for me, right? Like, I was like, I have no idea. Like, they thought maybe I'm going to be there forever.
Right.
I
Yeah.
thought I was going to be there forever.
Yeah.
Um, and what's going to happen with the baby. So the treatment that they were able to give me because I was pregnant was also, um, very limited. Like, the number of, like, things that they could do to help control that condition. But luckily, I was out of that, like, complete chaotic haze in just about 5 days. So I stayed at the hospital for, not only because 10 days in a PICU is still a really long time,
Yeah.
but yeah, I was there for 10 days, and they realized later on that, um, it could have been because they had added an antidepressant to my medication.
Right.
Because I was pregnant, they couldn't use some of the other mood stabilizing drugs like Epival or lithium because they would be very harmful to the
Right.
fetus. So they added an antidepressant, which actually was how I became hypomanic in the first place 25 years ago. So my body is just, like, really sensitive to antidepressants.
Yeah.
And then with the hormones of pregnancy, it was really, really hard. So they were they were very hopeful that things would stabilize. But even I remember my doctors were surprised how quickly everything just came back to baseline for me again.
Yeah.
And then, but during that pregnancy with my daughter, I was very anxious
Yeah.
because I kept thinking, oh my gosh, this huge thing happened, when she was just like 3 months old, whatever, in utero, three
Yeah.
months. Um, and uh, and then I had to go on a mood stabilizer. So I was on Seroquel for the remainder of the pregnancy. And yeah, so there was a lot that happened during that time. It was very difficult. And of course, it wasn't when I felt comfortable yet to share with many people.
Right.
So it was really just like my psychiatrist that knew, and they were like such an amazing team at Sunnybrook. Um,
Yeah.
and my parents, my husband, close friends, but like not many people even knew like how to give support during that time
Yeah.
because I didn't even know what kind of support I needed either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of like the accommodations piece that you're
Yeah.
talking about. Like I just felt, well, all the moms do this, so why can I just do this? Like why do I need extra help? Like
Right.
everybody else could do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's wow, it's just hearing you say that back. Like I've always read about how women experience bipolar, and there's certain unique factors for a woman with bipolar, and even having children and what that looks like. Like just hearing you in the last 2 minutes, I've learned so much more about the topic than I even knew
Mm,
coming into this interview, and something that I definitely want to continue to educate myself on, because I think there's so many unique gender aspects to even how we live the condition, right? Like there's a lot of similarities, but things that are very unique. Because one of the things, even speaking it to from a parent aspect, that I was always somewhat thankful for was I always was thankful that this happened to me prior to me having a wife and children,
mm, okay.
because I was very scared about what that would look like if I was
Mm,
in a hospital and I was able to be completely selfish in my recovery
mm,
and do things that only were beneficial for myself
right. Right.
to heal,
Yeah.
versus when I've seen friends of mine that have bipolar, that have a family. I find sometimes balancing their healing and what they need to get past an episode and what their family needs from them, there can be a conflict there.
Mm,
And I don't know if that's something that internally you've struggled with or seen, but just something that just appears that I was very thankful that I didn't have to deal with that.
yeah.
You know,
It is really hard to choose between your body and your body healing versus, um, you know, a human that you're growing, right?
yeah,
So I had to definitely make that choice at that time. But luckily, I think because if it was like 30 years ago, I think I wouldn't have recovered how I have. But because there's better choices now available for women who are dealing with this, because the onset of a like manic episode in the first trimester of pregnancy is actually very common for women, just because it's the
yeah,
most precarious time hormonally. And at that time, I didn't even know like what that all meant. And now I'm definitely a lot more like educated and um, aware, but it didn't really end there, because after having my daughter, I was thrown into like such a deep depressive episode that lasted for practically a year. Like that postpartum depression hit me really hard.
right.
And my medical team anticipated that too,
Hmm.
that this would probably happen, and it did within days of giving birth. So it's really a hard decision, and I would say because of that experience, we made a conscious choice not to have any more kids
Right.
because we just can't like go through that again.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
likely that it will happen like that again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's I'm so happy that we're having this conversation today, because these are the things that people need to hear, right? They need to understand things. But I mean, even with myself in thinking, if I ever had the privilege or the benefit of having a child,
Mhm.
is I understand the risk factors of what that looks like, but I also understand that, just because I have bipolar doesn't exclusively prohibit me from having children.
Yeah.
If I want it bad enough, and my wife would want it bad enough, um, we just need to work through, the different aspects and the different risks associated with it, right? And what
Yeah.
that looks like. And definitely people struggle with that, right? So
Well, I think even the medical community, because my very first OB, I won't mention any names, um, I lost 2 pregnancies. And by the second one, he actually said to me, like, are you sure it's a good idea to to try more?
yeah,
You live with bipolar disorder.
yeah,
And I was like, what does that mean?
yeah,
And he's like, well, there's high heritability of this condition. And so I got so angry because I said, are you saying that people that live with like a condition that has a hereditary link don't deserve to be parents? Do you say this to your patients who have diabetes? Like, the heritability of diabetes is way higher than the heritability of bipolar disorder.
yeah,
So right away I went to see my family doctor. I was like, I need to change OBs. I cannot
yeah,
see this OB.
yeah,
And he was this like elderly white male. And I just thought, wow, this is not okay.
yeah,
Like, it's like selective breeding. And I just thought, but of course, that has internalized shame for me as well, right? That maybe I don't deserve to be a mom. Like, maybe that's why I had 2 miscarriages. So it's a very complicated area for people that live with um, any kind of condition, but like
yeah,
for bipolar specifically, it's like you feel so much guilt and shame already without having a medical professional to tell you, are you sure you're okay? Are you sure you should be having kids?
yeah,
But
yeah.
that happens to women.
No, and not that I can relate from that specific perspective, but your point on the medical community is so valid, because when I had my first episode, I was actually out of country at a work conference,
Right.
and they actually had to send an emergency. I don't even know what they were. It was like a SWAT team that came in to
Yeah.
get me back to Canada.
Yeah.
And when I entered the emergency room, like, I could see the look of panic and confusion on my mom's face.
Yeah.
I was in such a state that I thought I had driven her crazy. I didn't appreciate that
Mhm.
I was actually in a state of
Right.
psychosis.
Yeah.
So I thought something was wrong with her. So now I'm trying to piece this all together. I have her on one hand, I had my girlfriend on the other side. They both look confused, as hell. And I'm looking at this, and the psychiatrist walks in the room,
Yeah.
all smug, kind of sits there, and he just sits down and is like, don't pretend to know more about this than I do. And I'm like,
What?
what is this guy talking about?
Yeah.
I don't even know what's going on right now. Like, my
Yeah.
mom's like, I think my mom's sick, right? I'm like,
Right.
what is this guy
Right.
talking about? And he prescribes me some stuff, sends me home. I'm still in like a very heightened state. Like,
Mm.
they did not hospitalize me at that moment. Like, my mom and my girlfriend at the time were like, no, something is very wrong here.
Yeah.
So then the next day, we went back to another hospital's emergency room, sat there for, I think, 18 hours. I'm like in a heightened state. Like, you can imagine sitting in a emergency room for 18 hours with someone in a state of psychosis.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of going through the protocols, and finally get checked into that hospital and get connected with a psychiatrist that was, in my opinion, more compassionate,
Yeah.
and just allowed it to work its way through, and
Right.
hospitalized me. I was there
Mm.
for 2 weeks, kind of stabilized me where I can start to see things a bit more clearly.
Yeah.
That,
Mm.
just because they're doctors doesn't mean they're right.
Yeah.
And we need to educate ourselves to feel comfortable that our doctors have our best interests at heart and are not just following some sort of protocol that they think they have or learned in school,
Yeah.
and that, you know, they are doing what we need as individuals that live with the with the disorder, you know.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
totally agree. That must have been so scary, like for
Yeah.
everybody involved, right? You, your mom, your former girlfriend. Like it's just because I remember that. I remember that look from my husband and my parents. And then I'm like, I don't know what's happening. Why are they all looking at me
Yeah.
like this? What am I doing?
Yeah.
You know? And I remember there was one part of your story because right when you messaged me, um, I was like, who is this? And then you said, oh, it's Shak from the talk. And I was like, oh, Shak, okay. And then I just read your entire story. And as I mentioned to you before, like I don't actually read a lot text anymore,
Yeah.
but your story really grabbed me. And I read your entire story. And there was one point in your story you talked about stripping naked. I was like, what is going on with this? Because I did the same thing. But then I thought that's what I had to do.
Yeah.
So then when everybody was looking at me like really shocked, I was like, why are you shocked? Like this is what I was supposed to do, or
Yeah.
this is what I have to do. But yeah, like standing from their perspective,
Yeah.
like that was like really scary,
Yeah.
right? And another now friend who lived with bipolar disorder did the same thing. This whole stripping naked, I don't know.
It seems to be the pattern.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
She jumped into a river, but it's just like, yeah, I can see outside looking in how scary it could be and how hard it must be.
Yeah.
But, you know, coming back to this whole concept of being okay to have support, being okay to ask for help or accommodations, I think the lived experience is a double-edged sword, right? Like it's great because when we have lived experience, we can talk very powerfully from
Yeah.
our experience. But then people who have lived experience, the reason they can talk powerfully is because they live with something really significant that
Yeah.
impact them. But I don't think that the accommodations are really out there that's readily available.
Yeah.
Even I've had clients, corporate clients, who reach out to me, want me to be a keynote or facilitate my workshops. And they would say, and I would say to them, and that was when I was still not yet fully stabilized. And I said, I'd be happy to, but I need your flexibility.
Mm.
You know, could I record a backup video for the keynote in case I'm just hit with a depressive episode, which is usually what
Right.
happens to me, and I can't be there live. Like I can't get on a plane, I can't be there live. And I know this would be disruptive, but could that be an accommodation that you would be willing to make for me
Right.
to be the keynote?
Right.
And and I have had clients say, no, we can't.
Yeah.
Like you got to just be there. I have never had to use the Plan B video, but I'm truly grateful for the clients who have been able to give this accommodation.
Yeah.
So I think we can absolutely thrive in life in doing different things, but I think there just needs to be that understanding and that accommodation.
Yeah.
But we have to ask for it too,
Yeah.
I think, or be okay with asking for it. And
Yeah.
they may say no.
No, it's I completely agree with that because as I have begun my keynote journey as well, I think a lot of that is my fear. Am I going to be at the best and what I need to be for that
Yeah.
talk? And I love how you've kind of positioned it where you do need a backup and need to think about that sometimes. And it's okay, right? It's okay to have those backups in place. And you know, I know I can talk to you for hours, Yollanda, and I'm sure we will
Mhm.
continue to talk to each other for hours at a time. But in concluding this interview, I'd really like to thank you for being here and spending time with me and making time. You know, this is Easter weekend, so I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. I know you yourself are also writing a book, and I really look forward to reading that book and supporting you and doing anything I can do to help support you in your own causes as well. I notice you're wearing purple as well, which happens to be your brand color as well. And I think it's interesting, right? As empaths and people that care about those in our community and those around us, I think purple is just such a natural color in that regard.
Hmm.
And I actually, it's funny. I created a bunch of hoodies and t-shirts and hats with my brand colors, and I've been handing them out to friends and family that kind of have supported me and supported my cause. But you're the first person I'm going to be giving the swag to that I think will fully embrace everything that the brand is about. So, as a thank you gesture to you, I just
Oh,
wanted to give you a bag of goodies with the
thank you.
hoodies
Oh
and the
my
hat and the
gosh.
t-shirt.